All right, in this chapter, we're going to take a closer look at something called the pen tool and the clipping mask. And while we're learning the pen tool and clipping mask, we're going to take a closer look at how the layer panel works in Illustrator. We're going to look at how we can add in textures like what we did in Photoshop using blending modes, like where are blending modes in Photoshop, excuse me, Illustrator. And then some of the variants that we see in clipping mask and their use between Illustrator and Photoshop. And to do that, we're going to make this nice little cutout of this woman that will then lay over this underlying image of a flower. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, to get started, we are going to make a new file again. So we'll go up to New File. From here, we'll just leave this alone, but we are going to come over here to the right and change some settings. We're going to do chapter 14 I don't know, Love My Lawn or whatever gives you a giggle. Love my lawn full of clover. We're going to set our size to be a standard size of tabloid. So under width, we are going to do 11. And under height, we're going to do 17. So like if you had 2 sheets of an 8.5 by 11 paper and you stuck them together, you would have 11 by 17, standard size. And we want this in portrait orientation this time instead of landscape. We're going to go ahead and leave bleed alone. We're going to do RGB again. We're going to do 300 again. This will all be good for us. And we'll click Create. Next, we're going to add in our reference image for tracing out our woman, and we're going to add it in a special way. So we're going to come up to File, and we're going to go to Place, navigate to wherever your files are at. Next, we're going to add in our reference image for tracing out our woman cutout. And to do that, we're going to add it in a special way. Some of the steps are still the same, though. So we're going to come up to File, and we're still going to go to Place. You should navigate to wherever your files are at, and we should find this nice picture of Adrian Ames. And instead of doing linked, we're going to do template. And template will bring it in a way that makes it easy to work with as a template. Let's get this a little bit bigger first. Remember when resizing, notice I'm going to stretch it, so I need to start holding Shift. Oops, didn't want to resize. Got to unlock it first. Oop. And what this does is it brings it in a special mode that makes it easier to work with as something you're going to trace over. So it drops the opacity down, makes it semi-transparent, and makes it easier for us to draw over. Now, when we're in the Layers panel, we still have some familiarity with how things work. Let's just throw a quick rectangle on here so it's a little bit easier for us to see. So let's go ahead and click on the rectangle tool. Let's set it to default white and black, and then let's empty out our fill. And I want this to be a standard size. So I'm going to come up to, I want this to match the size of my paper. So I'm going to make layer 1 active rather than layer 2. And I can tell which one is active, by the way, because the little caret, not necessarily the highlight. And I'm going to click right here where it says page right now. Notice the little purple page. And that's telling me that it's going to automatically snap to this corner. And I'll drag it down to the other corner. Notice how it's snapping and saying page again. And now I should have an 11 by 17. Oh, not quite 17. Let's type that in. And then recenter it, because sometimes Illustrator, I had the lock on. Sometimes Illustrator doesn't quite snap it into place the way you want it to. Let's crack open this layer so we can see the inside of it. We can crack this one open and see the inside of it as well. So some of the stuff is the same, some of it's different. So like the layout, we don't have all those controls up here anymore. Some of those controls will be available up here in the control panel, but not all of them. And we can set our visibility still by clicking it on and off. We can still lock it by clicking to the right of the eyeball. We still have some identification of special layer types. So in this case, we have our view mode for our template layer. We can also set something as the target of a tool by clicking on the little circle next to it. I got to unlock it first, silly me. So I can say this is the target of whatever tool or thing I'm about to change. And I can also select it by clicking on the little select button right here. I can still rename things by double clicking on it, and I can still group things by Command G-ing. I can also come down here to the bottom and still add in new layers. But notice when I add in a new layer, I'm just adding in an empty, basically, group that I will be putting things in. Like layer transformations or adjustments aren't a thing anymore. Layers just represent, like you can think of it as cut out junk on my desk. So like it's just stuff. And layer order still does matter. Okay, now since this is a template layer, we can't directly add stuff to it and it's locked. So we are going to instead add it to our regular layer up here. In fact, why don't we go ahead and double click this and label this design. And why don't we come down here and where it says template, we'll label this woman, because that is what we're going to, or references. References might be a better one, references. Okay, so to trace this out, we're going to use a new tool called the pen tool. So over here on the far left, you have something that looks like a pen. We also have something that's called the freeform pen, and we're going to avoid this one for now because the freeform pen, it's not bad because it's really a quick way to throw curves on here. But I want us to focus on using the pen tool that will give us a little bit more control and kind of help us learn more of this kind of vector anchor point line thing that we've been working through. So I'm going to click on this first one right here. And up at the top, I'm just going to pick any obnoxious fill color so it's easy for me to see, blue. And I'm going to pick a nice obnoxious stroke color like green. And you know what, why don't we make this bigger and do like 5? So it's nice and easy to see what we're doing. Now, as I'm using this tool, how it works is I can drop points with it. So I can be like, click-oo, and I suddenly have a point. And notice that I have a blue line coming off it right now. It's blue because my layer color over here is blue. And when I click again, boop, I get a stroked line that matched those settings I had earlier. And I can click again, and I can click again. And as I start getting points on there, more than 2 points, it will start having a fill. And when I want to finish a closed shape, I will mouse over the last part of it and see until I see a circle and click. Now that last little bit there is something that can cause a lot of trouble for students when they're first learning this. So if I go click, 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 some people will assume that this is a closed shape. In fact, it can even look more closed than this, and it won't actually be closed. So let me zoom in on this corner. Whoop, and we can see that these are even overlapping. But notice how like the stroke isn't finished. And if I grab the direct select tool and I click on this anchor point, I can move it separate. So these aren't actually joined. Similarly, even if it looks like this is where it really gets people, where the strokes are overlapping and touching each other, they're still not joined. And if you accidentally do this, it's easy enough to fix. You just grab the direct select tool and you click and drag over it so both points are selected, and you would go up to Object, Path, and Join, or Command J. That it's a hotkey should tell you that this happens a lot. And then you can finish your closed shape. And if you don't want like a little line between them, you would click on one so it's active. So you notice how this one's white and this one's blue. And I will then click on it again with the direct select tool and move them over each other. And then it's that Command J thing all over again. So when you're using the pen tool, you got to be really careful that you get those shapes. Now, sometimes you don't want to make a complete shape. Sometimes you just want to make like a curve. So if I go click, 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 and I don't want to continue drawing, I'll hit escape to stop drawing. So one more time in review, because a lot of people have trouble with this. Clickety, 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 click. To make a complete shape, I mouse over it. I see the circle. I'm good to go. To make an incomplete shape, I just go click, click, escape. And if I want to make a complete shape, but it's not quite joined together like these two, I can use the direct select tool to select both of those points and hit Command J. Now, what if I want to continue drawing in existing shapes like this one? Say I wanted to continue drawing more lines. I could make the pen tool active again, and I can mouse over one of the anchor points. Doesn't matter which one it is. And notice I get a little slash, and that says, please pick up from here. And then I can continue drawing again, and I can still hit escape to end that drawing. Okay, now if these shapes on here, just straight lines, aren't very useful or cool. So I want to be able to curve these lines. And to curve them, I'll come over to the pen tool and I'll click and hold, and I get the anchor point tool. How the anchor point tool works is I can click and drag on a line and I can bend it. Or I can click and drag on an anchor point and curve it. Notice as I'm curving it, I'm getting these little handles that are coming off. These are called Bezier control curves handles, and I can click them in order to change the appearance of that line or dial in that curve. I can always reset them with the anchor point tool active and simply clicking on that point again to fully reset them. I also don't necessarily need to have the anchor point tool active to access them. If I'm using the direct select tool, I can click on any of these anchor points to gain access to the related handles for that anchor point in order to, I always do that, in order to continue dialing in the appearance of that shape without necessarily having to add in the anchor point tool. Now let's say I wanted to add an anchor point. I could then click and hold and grab the add anchor point tool, add, and then modify that thing's position and appearance to my heart's desire. Or if I wanted to remove an anchor point, say I had too many on here, it's just like, oh my goodness, curving this out manually with these 3 anchor points was a mistake. I can grab the delete anchor point tool and remove these out. Now the delete anchor point tool does something very different than coming up and grabbing direct select, clicking on an anchor point and then clicking on it, because you can see how that broke the shape. There's no longer any stroke here. Versus if I do that same thing with the delete anchor point tool, that stroke remains there. So clicking with direct select and clicking on a single anchor point will break the shape, while remove anchor point will not. And this is a hard tool to get used to. Like, it's not the easiest thing in the world. Putz around with it for a minute. Pause the video if you need to putz with it, because we're going to trace out the shape of this woman. To trace out the shape of the woman, you will want to zoom in. And you're going to zoom pretty far in, so you're working with a small portion of the image at a time. And you want to be relatively accurate, but you're not going to want to lay down too many anchor points. Like if I pick up the pen tool, what I don't want to do is I don't want to go do. Like that's going to be too many points. I want to do this with a scarcity of points. Maybe make my stroke a little bit thinner. It's a little too obnoxious. And I'm going to turn off my fill color. What I want to do is I want to pick spots that are kind of quintessential locations for where there's going to be like a curve, or like where a curve begins, ends, or peaks. So like if I'm going to start, I'd probably start right here on her eyebrow, because that'll be really easy for me to curve out later. Maybe the top of her nose right here. Maybe I'll do tip of the nose, underside of the nose, lip, 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 lip. And then I'm going to just do the whole chin as a single thing, whole chin. And I'll come down to this neck, and I'm going to do an outline. So I don't want to follow this neckline. I want to follow the line of her outfit. I'm going to simplify it because I don't need all those curves in there. And I'm going to kind of guesstimate where this would end, probably right about there. I'll come up to here. Maybe I like that straight line right there. Maybe I'll do a little bit more detail back here compared to the front. And then here, I'm just going to have to guess on the hair. I'm just going to make stuff up. So like I'm going to guess the hair ends here. And we have like this is like where her flat of her hairline would be. So maybe I'm going to try some here. So I'm just going to do a single point right here. I have the little blup for her hairline and her forehead. So I'll add a single line there. And then I'll mouse over this first one and complete my shape. So I didn't use that many points. And in some areas where there's a lot of curve, I just knew that I'm going to come back with the Shift Anchor Point tool and modify this curve to match what I need. Now, a lot of people will want to start by clicking on the line. I found, depending on what you're curving out, it is more successful to start with the control point rather than the anchor point, in part because like you'll probably come back and want to putz with this section a little bit. Actually, I'm going to grab you and I'm going to basically straighten you out a little bit. Click back onto here, and I'm going to bring this down. Maybe I will flatten the head a little bit, just a hair. There we go. That looks pretty good for the back of the head. Forehead, there we go. Brow line, I'm just going to ever so slightly curve it. This, I'm going to actually click and drag on it because I want a nice hard edge right here for her nose. I'm going to click and drag this out because I want a nice hard edge for her nose. And this one, maybe I don't actually want it here anymore. Maybe that's the wrong spot. So if I hit A, I'm going to grab the direct select tool, click on that anchor point, and I'm going to bring it up a little bit. Then I'll go back to Shift C for the anchor point tool, and I'm going to curve that out. Curve, 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 massive curve. But you can see how like that's basically perfect for that chin. And right here, I could leave this straight, but pretty much for this design, you're going to want to slightly curve all of the lines, and maybe you want to curve them out, maybe you want to curve them in. It's not super critical, but I wouldn't leave any of these lines perfectly straight. In fact, I might even leave them all straight curves. I might do some S curves for a couple of these spots to kind of really style that line up. Maybe I'll S curve this one too. By S curve, I mean like see how it forms a slight S. This one, maybe I'll curve slightly out. I'll curve this one slightly in, maybe curve this one slightly out, and curve this one slightly in, giving us kind of a nice dynamic shape for her outline. Command 0. And let's go ahead and hide my reference layer. And I'm just going to click off to the side so it's not selected. And that's a pretty good cutout. Now I can quickly change the size of the cutout by making it active with the select tool or clicking on the little blue, clicking on the spot right here to activate it. And then when I change its size again, I will want to hold down Shift so I'm not stretching it. I am resizing it rather than stretching it. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Zoom, zoom, zoom. And let's bring you down here for now. Let's make you a little bit bigger. We're going to putz with the size on this quite a bit as we try to dial in its appearance. In fact, even before we do too much size work, let's add in the image that we're going to use to clip this. So I'm going to come up to File, and I'm going to go to Place, and I'm going to navigate to my flower image. There it is. And click Place. And if I just click it in, it comes in tiny, so I need to resize it. So let's get you bigger. I can't see what I'm doing, so I'm going to drag it below my paths. And let's start playing with the size. And the main thing what I want to do is I want to fill most of my design with what we've got going here. And again, anything that goes past the edge of my artboard, that doesn't matter. My artboard will, oops, got into isolation mode. We're going to hide everything that exits that artboard here in a minute. I want to nestle. Maybe I want this a little bit smaller. Yeah, and then let's make the image a little bit smaller. Again, whenever I'm distorting this, I'm having to hold down the Shift key. And I'm not too worried about this flat edge because I can always come here and move everything down to hide that flat edge. Flower's still a little big. Let's make you a little bit smaller. Maybe I'll make my cutout a little bit bigger. Again, whenever I'm doing this, I'm holding down Shift. If you're fighting with Snap, you just go up to View and turn Smart Guides, in this case, off. They changed the name of it. Nah, that's too big. Let's make the flower smaller. Flower's too small now. Let's do that one more time. Sorry if I'm being a little irritating here. And then we'll move it all down so it's about like so. You move it over a little bit more. Okay. Now what I want to do is I only want to see the part of the image that is contained by this green outline. So we're going to make a clipping mask. And clipping masks are a little bit different in Photoshop, is that I can clip out stuff to fill shapes, which is, you know, a lot of what you're going to do in Illustrator. So I'm going to make both of these active. So I'll click on one, I'll shift click on the other. Although since these are the only two things and the other thing is locked, I could also just grab the select tool and click and drag until they're both touched by the square, and that would select them as well. Again, this only works because these are the only two elements. Otherwise, you'd be fighting other elements on the screen. Let's go ahead and make our clipping mask. I'm going to come up to Object. I always have the worst time finding this. I'm going to go up to Object, and I'm going to go to Clipping Mask. Why can I never find it? There it is. And click Make. And we can see how that creates and hides everything based on that outline. Notice how it's a group now, so maybe I'll label this flower clip or something descriptive like that. More so than in Photoshop, keeping your layers and stuff highly organized in Illustrator is going to matter because you can quickly end up with hundreds upon hundreds of elements in Illustrator. So if you're disorganized, you are going to be hopelessly lost at some point with everything that you've got. All right, let's add in some text. So I'm going to go to the T for Text tool. In my Properties panel, I'm going to come over and I'm going to find a special font. I'm going to do Fairweather. And if Fairweather is missing, because look, it's a little cloud one for me. I've covered installing fonts enough times from the Creative Cloud that you should be able to go to the Creative Cloud website and download Fairweather. So go ahead and pause, download Fairweather, and get so you can be up onto the step. And we'll click it to make it active. For sizing, we are going to do 120. And then we're going to just simply click over here, boop, and we're going to type in my lawn. I'll escape to exit the type. That automatically puts me into the select tool, which you can kind of think as the move tool. And let's just center this on here. Oops. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit so it's easier for me to work. Spacing wise, let's move it up. Easy way to think about spacing is equal side top, equal on the sides and top. Not always, but like it's a little easy rule of thumb. It doesn't have to be perfectly even. Like what I'm really looking at is like the edge of the M and not necessarily the edge of the serif, and the edge of the N versus the edge of the top. So like I'm not talking like this, that kind of weight thing we were talking about. It's like where's the visual spacing? So like even though this is thinner than this right here, this is about the spacing right here is about equal to the spacing right here. Again, like those serifs aren't going to impact that too much. So I want to kind of get it in there. Let's add in some more text in a related font because like this is all in caps and I don't want to be in all caps for the rest of this. So T for text tool, and you're going to have to go install another font. So I'm going to type in Ambrose. And Ambrose is, so pause right now, and you're going to go hunt down the Ambrose font. And we want, in this case, Ambrose Standard. Now, so I'm not fighting my lawn. I'm going to go ahead and lock it. And then I'll simply click. And I'm going to type, and how I learned to love. We can see this text is way too big, so let's select it again. And I'm going to set my size to be 60. And let's grab the select tool. Let's move you over. And I don't know, I'm going to make it roughly even with where, like if I was following this as a line coming down, I want it to hit that A. Maybe a little bit further over. We can putz with placement more here in a minute. Yeah, it needs to go a little bit further over. Yeah. So you see what I'm doing when I'm talking about with that A. So like, let me see, grab the pen tool for a second. So like if I was following the M, you see how that kind of matches where the A is going to be. So I'm using that kind of as a visual weight guide to show where I want to put my text. I'm going to go ahead and lock this one because I'm going to add another line of text. We could do this with spacing and stuff. It's just easier, I think, to do it as a second line. The clover. And I'm going to grab my move tool, and I'm going to continue that idea of that visual line. So like if that was continuing down, where would that end up with the clover? And I'm going to make sure I've got good spacing right here between my lines as well. In fact, looking at this, I'm going to make both of these active. I'm just, I got to unlock it. So I've got the select tool active, and I'm shift clicking on the other one. I need to move it over a little bit and down a little bit. Just making a little bit more spacing up there. And that looks okay. This will be good for the assignment at least. Let's group these two lines together. So I'm going to make them both active and hit Command G and label this subtitle text. And if I wanted to be fancy, I'd label this title. Let's change our color. So I'm going to unlock it, and then I'm going to make both of these active, shift click. So I've got them both selected. Over in swatches, I want a nice deep brown, and I'm going to pick the second to last brown right here. Yeah, that'll look pretty good later once I get my other stuff on there. I'm going to group both of these together. So I'm going to click on title and then shift click on the subtitle and Command G, and I'm going to label this text. And again, this is just condensing everything down because like if we start cracking everything open, we already have a decent number of layers, and this is a pretty simple design. Like when you get really fancy design, again, 50, 100 layers, those are not uncommon. And so you, even though this seems a little superfluous, you want to get into practice now of very clean, well-labeled, well-organized layers. I'm going to keep saying this because it's really important. And that looks pretty good for placement. Okay, next let's add in our paper texture. So I'm going to come up to File, and I'm going to go to Place. And I'm going to grab the paper texture book. That looks good. Make sure link is turned off. It should still be off from earlier, and I'll click Place. Zoom out a little bit. And I want it to just snap to my document edge. So I'm going to click roughly on my document edge, except I didn't have my snap turned on anymore. So I'm going to come back and turn back on Smart Guides and do that one more time. Thank you so much, my brain, for not remembering to turn that back on. It's just like, welcome to Smart Guides. You turn them on and off all the time. Page, there we go, drag down. And notice it's going to be too wide, so I'm just going to keep dragging over until it snaps. See a nice little pink line. I've got this extra over here that'll be fine. We'll deal with it here in a second. And instead of image, paper texture. Boop. All right, let's turn on multiply blending mode. So with this active, I can either click opacity here, or over in appearance, I can also click opacity. There's also a panel called appearance, boop, that you can also gain some control over this under, but we're just going to do it from here. So I'm going to click opacity. I can click where it says normal, and now I have access to multiply. I don't really want to multiply that flower design. I want it like that as if it was cut out of the paper. So I'm going to grab my flower clip and I'm going to drag it to be above paper texture. So now it's applying to my font and it's applying to my background in a way that's kind of neat. Let's add a shadow to our design, so like as if there is thickness to this paper. So to do that, I'm going to crack open my flower clip, and I've got my clipping path right here. I'm going to select it, and then I want to drag it out. So I'm going to alt drag my clipping layer to be above my flower clip, and now I have an extra outline, basically, is an easy way to think about it. Another way that you could do it is if you have it selected, you can come up to Edit, Copy, and you can do Edit, Paste in Place if it's not as easy to drag out. And I'm going to label this figure shadow or something like that. To add our figure shadow, I'm going to grab that same dark brown that we used on our text. So I'm going to make my stroke active over here, and then we can see I can click here to load up that last color that I used, or I can grab it out of recent colors, or I can grab it out of swatches. Illustrator makes grabbing the same stuff very easy, same color and appearance. For my size, I'm going to go ahead and bump it up to 10. So now we can see we've got like a 10 stroke outline on it. And basically, we just want to shove it over a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in so I can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to shove it over. And it's like, well, this doesn't look that good. That's not really a shadow. And that's because we need to drag this to be actually below our clipping mask. But I just accidentally dragged it in there. So I'm going to lock my clipping mask. And now when I drag this down, oops, now it's appearing below paper texture. That's irritating. Why won't you? There we go. And now when we move this around, we can see how that kind of appears as like this nice little thick shadow. So kind of get it down a little bit, pay attention to where it's going. And it's like we can see like, I think I need to move it down because it doesn't make any sense to have the shadow up there. So move it down. I moved it too far down. And when I say too far down, it's because I can start seeing like white spacing from around the edge of it. And that looks pretty good. In fact, why don't we actually just drag that below paper texture? Yeah, let's drag that below paper texture. That adds some of that kind of same appearance to it to kind of help sell that shadow in. Finally, let's make one more clipping mask to hide the extended parts of our image. So I'm going to grab the shape tool, and it doesn't really matter what the appearance is, and I'm just going to click, and I'll be like 11 by 17, please. Oops, not 14. Doot. And I'm going to center it on my screen. Center, not on my screen, on my artboard. Unlock anything that's in the main part of your artboard. I don't care about references, but I want the rest of this unlocked. And to have it to affect everything all at once, I'm going to hit Command A to select everything. I could also come up here and grab the select tool and just drag over everything. And again, I'll only be able to select everything if none of it's locked. And let's go to Object, Clipping Mask, and Make. And just like magic, we have hidden off that extra stuff. Not too bad. Now, if you need to move stuff around, like if you look at it and you're like, I want to putz around with stuff, crack this open, and then you'll have to grab the direct select, and then you can click on things to make it active. And so like I clicked on here, and if I hit V to switch back to my regular select, I can sometimes move things around a little bit more easily. But again, if I need to move things, I will need to first click on it with the direct select, or simply click on it over here in my layers panel to be able to move it separately from my clipping mask. All right, that's it. Save yourself an Illustrator file and do an export as, and save yourself a 300 ppi JPEG.